If you are a coach on a football team, you need to understand the analytics until you don't need to understand them. Analytics is both the most useful and the least useful part of a football coach's arsenal of tools that he can use on the field. Why? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And there's a debate inside of inside of football, whether it's the statistical trends that dominate or whether it's, I think the phrase is the Jimmies and the Joes, meaning the players on the field. Now, when one wants to decide this, one has to look at the whole statistical picture and understand something about statistics. Statistics mean everything to a trend. They mean nothing to an individual. So, for example, if I were to say most men of an Asian descent are shorter than a white man, means nothing if I'm taking a look at one single individual Asian person. They could be Yao Ming. They could be, 7 feet tall. But it is a trend. It is a statistical trend that we notice in the data. Now, let's bring this to football. Analytics became a big thing in football in the dawn of the new millennium. They were starting to pick up steam in the 90s, and by the dawn of the new millennium and the internet age, it became a big deal. A number of different analytics measures became very, very popular. ESPN keeps track of a whole bunch of garbage statistics that we're not even going to talk about. But there are two that I find to be particularly useful when I'm looking at a team. EPA and DVOA. EPA is, I'm looking at my whiteboard if you notice I'm not looking at you, is expected points added, and DVOA is defense adjusted value over average. Meaning, in expected points added, it's how many points did a play add over what you would expect in that situation. That requires you to know the points before and after. Defense adjusted value over average is a measure determining how that team performs adjusted for essentially how bad the other defense was. If the other defense is very, very, very good, a bad performance is not dinged as much. If the defense was very, 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 very bad, a dominant offensive performance is not going to move the needle much. These are great statistics when you get towards the middle of the season because they suffer from the same problem as any other statistic, which is that small sample sizes tend to ruin the batch. And unlike in, say, politics, these values reset every year because the teams are always brand new. So after the first game of the year, these statistics don't really tell you much. They tell you something. There's an indicator, but they don't tell you much. Statistics are incredibly important to keep in mind, but they shouldn't dominate your thinking when you're trying to analyze a football team. Because there's a number of things that statistics don't take into account. I'm going to use the AFC Championship game as an example. Statistics don't take a couple of things into account. For example, the Broncos have any number of statistics in their favor that would tell you that they're a dominant offensive team. They became the number one seed, so in some ways their offense was dominant. I'm not saying they were the number one offense. I'm saying that their offense did the job more often than not. And their defense, we all know their defense was stellar. We saw that in the game. Patriots, you have a similar situation. But when you see those two statistics, the pile of statistics would tell you that was going to be an explosive, fireworks-driven game. They had two good defenses, they had two good offenses, and this should be a game that goes punch for punch. There's a number of things that those statistics, however, don't take into account. For example, the statistics don't automatically take into account that Drake May was having a bad playoff. He just was and continues to have a bad playoff. That doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, then that doesn't take away from his regular season dominance. It means he was having a bad playoff. On the Broncos side, Bo Nix played one game and then broke his ankle and is out for the rest of the playoffs, meaning that the Broncos were going to be relying on Jarrett Stidham. So any numbers you had on their offense analytically, you just throw them out the window. And there was another problem. No analytics can take into account human error or acts of God. So they can't take into account how bad of a quarterback Jarrett Stidham is when he's starting. He's a fine backup. And they can't take into account blizzards. And boy, did they get hit by a blizzard halfway through the third quarter of that game. And that then just throws everything out the window. every piece of analysis up to that point. Just the ball could bounce any different direction. You couldn't see the Patriots. Jarrett Stidham, tip of the cap to Sam Darnold. Jarrett Stidham probably was seeing ghosts. And you just can't account for what the wind is going to do at that point. You can't account for anything. The statistics no longer mean anything. And at that point, that is a game purely of just the Jimmies and the Joes, meaning the players have to figure it out. But for us at home, these statistics can have real life impacts. And this is really the crux of the issue here. These statistics get published and they get updated and constantly updated, and you can find them anywhere. For a really, really good statistical analysis historically of teams and for the current season, I recommend following Aaron Schatz and Mike Tanier. They're both brilliant, brilliant guys when it comes to breaking the game down statistically and helping us figure out what trends we might follow. But here's the problem. In reality, these statistics should just be for fun. They should be for, kicks and giggles. They should just be for that. But they have real world impacts now that gambling is both legal and embraced by football. What you need to know about statistics, analytics, and betting is simply this. No matter what analytics you have on your side, and no matter what any talking head on ESPN, NFL Network, Fox Sports, wherever might tell you, anytime you make a bet, your odds are no better than 50-50, and they're probably 60-40 in favor of the house. Because, like I just noted in the AFC Championship game, there are things that no amount of analysis can account for. Snowstorms in the middle of games, balls bouncing in different directions, a defender who's been on the bench all season just deciding that he was going to have his Wheaties that day and he was going to make a hero play. They can't account for those things, and there's a reason they can't account for those things. Like I said, statistics don't account for acts of God or human action. They just can't. They do their best, but they can't do that. And so your bet is 50-50 or 60-40 in favor of the house, but all these analytics and talking heads and analysis and yada, 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 they make you feel as though your bet is stronger. And that can be very, very dangerous. It's something we need to think about. We need to think much harder about it, because if we suddenly start to think that we've mastered how to predict what game is gonna happen which way, we're in trouble, because that's not the case at all. We can't predict that. We can predict a season-long trend if we have a large enough sample size, but the sample sizes are rarely large enough for us to make a trend in an individual game. If we're betting on a whole season, sure, maybe the statistics can help us there. Maybe. That's a huge maybe. Next time you watch ESPN brought to you by BetMGM, think about that. Think about how these analysts are essentially trying to guide your bet. And that's going to make you have some serious pause about whether or not you want to get involved. If you have the disposable income and you want to gamble, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You want to gamble and you have, you have a couple $100 and you just want to gamble it away, go for it. We'll talk more about that throughout this week. We're going to start a section in the show on how to analyze a game for fun. How to understand what you're watching in an individual game, not how to make your bets stronger. I can't make your bets stronger. No one on earth can make your bets stronger. My analysis is purely out of joy of watching the game, and watching the game that has already unfolded in front of your eyes, not the game that is going to unfold. I cannot predict how something is going to go. I can only help you understand what you've seen as opposed to what you are going to see. You trust me. Trying to predict what you are going to see is a fool's errand. You should just enjoy the game. If you want to go gamble, by all means, go gamble. I'm flashing warnings at you right now. Your bet is no better than 50-50, and it's probably 60-40 in favor of the house. And guess what? When you lose that bet, just the dumbest thing people do is they chase money. Don't chase money. We'll talk more about that this week. We'll do a whole thing on analysis, and every podcast I will do my darndest to remember to warn you, don't use my information for betting. I'm only helping you understand what you've seen, not what you will see. A quarterback may throw for 300 yards in this game. That doesn't mean he's going to throw for 300 yards in this game. He may throw for 4 touchdowns, then he may throw for 4 interceptions. And none of it has anything to do with the good analysis that I am going to teach you. Buckle up. It's going to be a fun week. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have yourself a great day. Don't gamble unless you have the money to gamble. And if you have a gambling problem, there are helplines in every single state to help you out. There's national gambling hotlines. Dial into one of those if you think you have a serious problem. And if you think you have a problem, give them a call anyway. There's no surefire way to find out if you have a problem. Seek help early, seek help often, and don't be ashamed to seek help. So once again, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.